Good afternoon and welcome on the second day of the FETSA conference. My name is Ramon Ernst. I'm a board member at FETSA and at the Dutch Industry Association VOTOP, and I'm also a managing director at EVOS, a bulk liquid tank storage company. I joined the FETSA board last year during COVID-19, but despite all the restrictions, it has become clear to me that FETSA is as strong as ever, representing 700 tank storage companies across Europe. Also, this annual conference has already been a success in its new virtual format. We have great speakers, network opportunities, and a supplier exposition. So let me thank you for participating as one of 160 participants joining this event. Today is the second day where we look in particular at the answers for the energy transition from an industry perspective. I very much look forward to the presentations and the discussions. I hope you enjoy this as well. I will now hand over to Ravi, our Executive Director, and he will guide you through the program today.
Thanks very much, Ramon. Before I introduce the speakers, I want to say a big thank you to VOTOB, to Ramon, and also to Willem Henk, the Executive Director of VOTOB, for helping me to organize the event and get the speakers together. I hope very much that we can meet face-to-face all together back in Rotterdam, perhaps later this year, for a nice social gathering that we have all missed over the last year. And before we begin, I also want to say a brief word about all our supporters. So I want to thank Tank Storage Magazine for supporting our conference, but not only for supporting our conference, but supporting FETSA throughout the time that I've been executive director, at least around a year and a half now, because they've been covering our work, helping to disseminate our views to the sector and beyond, and I really appreciate it. And thanks also to our supplier partners. A year ago, I honestly wouldn't have thought that we would be doing a virtual conference like today. And I definitely wouldn't have thought that we would be doing a virtual conference with such a prominent role of our supplier partners having a virtual expo and so on. Our partners are really bringing a lot of value to FETSA. You will have been reading their insights in our supplier briefing. The support is always very welcome. And so thanks also for being so dedicated. In terms of housekeeping, we have certain networking opportunities on the online platform. And also there's a symbol on the online platform, like a little kind of paper aeroplane. And this is where your notifications appear if somebody is trying to message you or ask you for a video chat. As regards the agenda, today we have 3 speakers, followed by a panel discussion. Thanks for tuning into the Industry Day. And the first speaker is Francois Biard. Francois is the Managing Director of Geocell. And I first met you, Francois, at FETSA's last physical event, which was in Tarragona. And in fact, during the dinner in Tarragona, Francois taught me more about tank storage in that brief period of time than I could have learned in several months of studying. So I thought he would make a great speaker. In addition, one of his expertises is emerging technologies. So I'm sure we're in good hands. Francois, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Ravi. So dear colleagues, let's start this afternoon, second day of FETSA. So I'm the Managing Director of Geocell, and maybe we can go to the first slide. And I would like to talk to you about what's our future for our activity. So if we look at what Mrs. von der Leyen recently said about the Green Deal, so we are going to be replaced. So this seems to be the plan for the European Green Deal. The European Green Deal has laid for us, and that's not very much enthusiastic, as a matter of fact. So the question is, do we really know, do we really want this future, but do we know which future we want to have? do we have are we able to draw ourselves our own future? So maybe the next slide, I will introduce this question more deeper. So as a managing director of Geocell, I don't want Geocell to disappear. I consider that Geocell, like many of our company, has still a bright future ahead. Just a few words of Geocell. It's been existing for more than 50 years. We've got 50 years of experience in oil storage. We got 9 million cubic meters of capacity. We store hydrocarbons, liquid hydrocarbons in underground, in 30 salt caverns underground. We got 40 kilometers of pipeline networks, and we transport more than 3.5 million cubic meters of products per year. And we have 3 very supportive shareholders, 2 refiners, Total and Petroineos, and TSH, which is a joint company between EDF and Ardian investment funds. So I really believe Geocell has some. I continue to have a lot of value to bring to this to our area, and we still have a bright future. So I don't want Mrs. van der Leyen to be right in my future. So maybe the next slide. Having said that, it is clear that there is something we must accept. We all love our businesses, but there is something very clear: is the energy transition is already moving. It's been launched, and we all know that oil products they are made of fossil fuels, and this fossil fuel, we used to say that peak oil will occur in 2020. Now expert forecasts peak oil for 2040. However, it's coming. So one day or another, there will be no more fossil fuels. So this will disappear one day or another. Moreover, we all know the Paris Agreement effects and the targets about the climate change and the reduction of emissions of greenhouse gases emissions. And it's moving. And most of our customers, most of our clients, BP, Shell, Total, many of our customers are already heavily committed to this energy transition. So it is something that is really moving, that is occurring, and we cannot resist. I don't think we should accept that fact. And maybe on the next slide, please. And having said that, we can, even though the energy transition is moving, even though it's clearly something that's occurring, there is still it doesn't change so fast. It doesn't change so quickly. A good example of that is that 41%, more than 40% of final energy consumption in Europe is still made of oil. So it won't be easily replaced, and we will continue to use oil and oil products for a very long time ahead of us. It won't be easily replaced. Though there is in this scenario, in this situation, there is a very tempting attitude that is a wait-and-see attitude, that is a business-as-usual option, considering that, okay, it will move, but it will move very slowly. So we can cope with new regulation, we can resist any kind of new regulation, we can compensate reduction in volume by increasing tariffs, having many I would say, fortress strategies. And moreover, if we get to the next slide, please. Yes, and this feeling of business as usual is very much reinforced by the fact that the scenarios that are currently shown to us, presented to us, are very continue to incorporate a lot of uncertainties. A very good example for this is if we consider hybrid and electric cars in the world, at which pace these cars will replace the existing cars. And if you listen to BCG, they say that by 2030, 51% of sales of cars will be hybrid or electric. If you look at Deloitte scenarios, Deloitte says it will be 32% of sales. These are huge figures, clearly, in both cases, but the difference is still huge. And in such a difference, we still have a good room. There is still a lot of rooms for our existing businesses. And so with such uncertainties, and we have all seen that there are a lot of nice speech, and I'm from Paris, so I know the Paris Agreement. There are a lot of nice speeches they are very a lot of will to change things, but as a matter of fact, things doesn't change very quickly. As a matter of fact, the pandemic has made much more to reduce the oil consumption than any kind of policy. And when the pandemic will be over, there are plenty of back to business as usual scenarios. Moreover, if we consider which kind of fuels will be considered as sustainable fuels, we also see very different key indicators. Some say that we should consider the CO2 emission implied by certain type of fuels. And we should only consider sustainable fuels, those that are limiting their emission. Other strategy says that we should consider the life cycle analysis to decide which kind of fuel is interesting. And as a matter of fact, many voices say that electric cars are not so environmentally friendly, depending on which kind of energy has been used to build the batteries and which kind of electricity and how the electricity is produced. Basically, if you produce a battery with a highly carbonized power generation, and if you fill in your batteries with electricity that has been made from coal, the environmental result is not very good for an electric car. So all those uncertainties, all those debates, they are existing debates. They may push us to adapt this wait and see attitude. Having said that, the energy transition is still moving. And so there is still a question. I still have a question and rings in my head is, do we continue to wait? Should we wait until something dramatically changes? You know, French absolutely love revolutions. So we know in France, we absolutely love to change only when we are forced to, and otherwise we just keep things going. And that's why we have so many revolutions in France. But we can probably adapt another attitude. So maybe on the next slide, I will continue to explore this. And if we consider the kind of fuels that might be used for the future, there might be a good news. Most of our industry, we transport energy in a liquid form. And how mobility will use energy in the future? How mobility will use energy in the future? And in this chart, we have various types of vehicles, and we compare the range used for those vehicles with the kind of energy they are using. And it is clear that for vehicles that are used inside the city or within a limited range, batteries are very efficient. Low emissions, low noise, very easily to plug your car when you are in a city. Well, probably in major European cities, we will see more and more electric vehicles for small transportation, small load transportation, and small cars. But from the moment you start to necessitate more range or more payload, then other kind of fuels like hydrogen, like biofuels, are much more relevant than only batteries. Basically, big trucks with batteries, we all see that Tesla is constantly delaying the production of his electric trucks. Clearly, because an electric trucks mainly transport a huge battery and has a very, very limited payload. So, and if you consider heavy trucks and boats and planes, clearly liquid fuels are the only realistic option, are the only option. And so probably the industry will produce more and more decarbonized liquid fuel, e-fuels, biofuels, hydrogen, clearly hydrogen, whether it's on a gas form or on a liquid form. But those fuels, they are still, I believe that it's a good chance for us and it's a real opportunity for our business. And that's why I will continue to explore this idea in the next slide, please. And if we consider what we have, I believe that we have three main assets to be part of this energy transition. First, we see that these liquid fuels or these new fuels will be used by the mobility. And we have a geographical coverage that is well adapted to mobility. Basically, an electric network is designed to transport electricity from a power plant to a city. Same for a gas network. So if you are in a city, it's very convenient to plug your car. But if you're in the middle of the country or if you need to cross Europe, well, you start to have some difficulties. And we all know that it's not that easy. Our infrastructure, our oil storage system is really well adapted for this kind of, to distribute fuels to for the mobility. We have quite a high level of flexibility. We've been able to accommodate new fuels, low sulfur fuels, biofuels, LPG, and so we've already demonstrated, we already shown or gave evidence that we were really able to adapt ourselves to moving environment. And last but not least, certainly not least, I believe that we have a unique expertise to manage environmental risk. In fuel, you have energy. Energy means risk, means environmental impact, and it can be very detrimental. We all know that hydrogen is a highly explosive gas, and biofuels are both more or less the same, can produce exactly the same effects than fossil fuels. And and we have a specific industrial culture very much oriented toward managing environmental risk, managing industrial risk. And I believe it's not that easy to acquire such a culture. It has taken us decades, not to say centuries. And the only way you learn that, unfortunately, is the hard way. You learn after a major accident. You change your procedure after a major accident. It is not reasonable, in my opinion, to get rid of that culture, get rid of that industrial culture we have, and to try to educate newcomers and then just wait that they produce huge accidents, huge damages, just to have them learning the procedure that we already know, that we already have. And so these are the three main assets, and I think that it's a clear foundation for us to move forward. Let's look at the next slide, please. So my opinion, and you have understood it already, is clearly to be part of this energy transition. And that's this chart is just an example of the kind of project I believe we should concentrate and we should work on it. Clearly, our infrastructure will change, but there will be in all over Europe massive massive local project to reorganize the energy infrastructure. And we should be part of this massive local project. They will distribute new forms of energy, whether it's gas energy, whether it's a liquid energy, but we have a key role to play in that, and we should really promote our infrastructure towards this project. We should be part of this project. And secondly, to be part of this project, we should also clearly, actively, rather than resisting to new regulation, resisting to authorities that want us to disappear, we should go to these authorities and we should try to define with them a common roadmap, being explaining them, educating them that we can be part of the energy transition. And if you look at if we have the next slide, preparing my presentation to the FETSA. Maybe the next slide, please. I heard Patrick Pouyanné. As you know, Patrick Pouyanné is the CEO of Total, so I don't compare myself to Patrick Pouyanné. But I was really working on this presentation. Ravi was putting pressure on me to send him my slides. When I heard Patrick Pouyanné saying, without Total, energy transition may have to wait a long time. And that's really a very interesting sentence. That means that energy transition, it's clearly coming for many reasons, whether it's because we have to fight against climate change, or whether we are concerned by the fact that one day or another fossil fuel will disappear. We have to change. But this change will occur. We can be part, we must be part of this change, and this change will be much easier and much quicker and much softer if we are part of the story, rather than if the story is written without us or even written against us, like Mrs. von der Leyen said in our introduction. So I really believe that we should be part of this energy transition, that we should work with the authorities to try to define a common future and be just part of that. We can bring so much to the energy transition. Maybe we can have the next slide, please. So basically, I just want to raise a question to you. It's a very open question. It's for you to think about it. Clearly, we have an option. We can say business as usual option exists, and it will last the time it will last, and we will take the money and we will continue our business. Or we can change, we can design, we can move forward and build a common roadmap with the authorities, which means that building a legal frame, designing a legal frame, also defining clear objectives. What should we change? How should we change it? What kind of fuels should we accommodate? How they will be distributed? What kind of HEC problem or issue we should identify and solve? And obviously, we are eligible to gain financial support. There is no reason why public funding should only go to other industry rather than ours. And we can explain that it's a good investment for public authorities to invest in our existing infrastructure, because it will be less costly, less painful, and it will be much quicker to use our infrastructure. At least that's my opinion. I wanted to share this opinion with you and just raise this question for you. Do you agree with the fact that we should build a common roadmap with public authorities? Yes or no? Anyway, and thank you very much for your attention, and I'm very eager to share your views, to share the views with you.
Thanks very much, Francois, for your strategic presentation, if I can describe it like that. Please stay on the line, because we will have the panel discussion after the presentations. Let me now introduce the second speaker. The second speaker is Robert van Chenen. He's manager for strategy and business development at Groningen Seaports, but he's also one of the project leaders of a project called North 2, which is a dedicated hydrogen project. Robert, you come with an interesting case study on hydrogen to share with us, so the floor is yours.
Thank you, Ravi, and my pleasure to present the NordH2 project to you all. So NordH2, kickstarting the green hydrogen economy. It's a project that tends to touch all the various facets in the value chain. I'll tell you later on. First off, we started with together with Shell, the province of Groningen, which is like the regional minister here in the Northern Netherlands, and of course Gasunie as a dominant gas distributor in this part of Europe. And Equinor and RWE decided to join over the following months. So this is truly a project that is backed up by serious companies, as well as the public authorities here in the Northern Netherlands. I think that's something Francois just addressed, and I wanted to say I totally agreed with the question. I think there should be a combined roadmap between public and private organizations and companies like ourselves. Next slide, please. When presenting NordH2, I need to put it in context of a even larger plan, which is called the Hydrogen Investment Plan of the Northern Netherlands. That's a 9 billion investment plan. So over 50 projects were, well, not just announced, but brought together in an investment plan, which we try to push forward over the next coming years. We strongly believe the Northern Netherlands has a unique position based on the fact that we already have lots of infrastructure for the gas industry here, needed to give a proper boost on the hydrogen economy. Of course, geographics come into play, but having all those assets here in the region makes us starting at a lower cost level than when would you do a completely new project. This is actually the announcement. Just like this conference, we had to do it online. That's something we're getting used to. But I do miss the interaction with you as an audience, of course. The same happened there where we had to speak into a camera. That's actually me telling a story about the hydrogen economy. And besides me are, and this is important, members of parliament. So from a variety of parties, members of parliament were invited to ask questions and listen to our presentations coming from the public authorities, people from private companies in the region, and of course, Gasunie. So quite exciting times, and we got very positive feedback from the members of parliament. And I'm sure lots of you are aware of the fact that we recently had elections, and we hope, based on the reflection we got from the members of parliament during that announcement, we hope that hydrogen will be acknowledged in, let's say, the new government plans for the Netherlands for the next 4 years. And we strongly believe that it will have a dominant place in the energy transition plans for the Netherlands. Next slide, please. So why the north of the Netherlands? Well, there's a proximity to resources here. I'm sure you're aware there's lots of plans of building larger wind farms on the North Sea. And let's say the North Sea that is relevant to us is, of course, north of our ports area. So north of the Eemshaven port. There's a possibility to implement 4 to 6 gigawatt in the time frame of, let's say, between 2024 and 2030, which could be used by this project. And it all starts, of course, with bringing into play more green energy. So we need those new wind energy capacity at the lowest cost possible. One of the reasons why it's so interesting to have this amount of partners on board now. So again, Shell, RWE, Equinor, etc. They have knowledge in this field, have done projects before. But I'm sure you all agree that if you want to do hydrogen successfully, all the various costs need to come down along the value chain. So having this these resources relatively close by on the North Sea is important. The other factor is transportation, of course, and storage capacity. So our particular region has lots of gas infrastructure, which could be revised into hydrogen infrastructure. And we have storage here as well. So these are salt caverns. Something you'll see along this coastal line here, all the way up to northern Germany, of course. But having that here already built, and we can build extra storage capacity, makes it an quite successful starting point for the project. And then the third element comes into play. That's access to knowledge and markets, of course. And I don't think you need to explain the markets here. We're right in the middle of the Western European power market. Our port is already an electricity roundabout of about 8,000 megawatts, and we're currently building on. Last night we announced to further extend our port, making it almost twice as big as it is now. But we need to do so in order to create space for electrolyzers in the vicinity of the port. So that's markets, that's space. And again, like the question Francois just asked, we're doing that in combination with the public authorities. The other thing is knowledge. Groningen as a province is famous for its energy institutions. Of course, based on the factor that we had a lot of gas in our region. So that makes that we tend to think we have a complete value chain placed for here. So security of supply can be assured from the start. Next slide, please. Yeah, if you could hit the button 2 times again. Thank you. And again, please. Yeah, that's it. Yeah, that's perfect. Thank you. So if you look at what we're trying to do here is bring into play big volumes of green hydrogen, of course, the production side to decarbonize the hard-to-abate sectors in the industry. Another factor that I didn't mention before is that we actually have 2 ports. The other port is the port of Delfzijl. There's already demand coming from that port in terms of hydrogen, and that demand is growing, and not just by the typical industry or chemical industry, but also the recycling industry. So let's say the circular economy comes into play. They want to use hydrogen as a building stone for their products as well. And I'll tell a little bit about one example in one of my last slides, but you need some perspective for the market where they can look at areas and build their new factories based on the fact that there will be cheaper hydrogen, which gives them let's say a way to mitigate risk around CO2 pricing, etc. And of course, this region is close to Germany. Those are our neighbors. If I would be in my office, I could look at Germany. But we can, of course, support the Northwestern European markets as a front runner in green hydrogen. Next slide. Yeah, if you could hit it again for the bullets. Thank you. So how? Well, I briefly explained this by scaling up 100% green hydrogen production and by building the first gigawatt scale integrated value chain project. It all comes down to scale here. So we're going to look at approximately 4 gigawatt in the first phase, running up to 2030. So if you look at worldwide projects and take into account the investment plan I talked about in my second slide, this is one of the regions in the world that is in competition with NEOM project or projects in Australia and Japan, just based on the scale of things. Lots of things need to happen worldwide, and like Francois said, the transition has started. I like that pretty much because this is typically a project where we just get going, and we already have 180 people working on the project enthusiastically, and we're seeing in our let's say our standard surveys, we see costs coming down, so that's good. And we need to support technology that brings costs down overall for society. Next slide, please. Yeah, I tipped upon that already. Thank you. Well, just want to emphasize that we're looking at 4 gigawatt to be operational by 2026, 2030. I'm sure all of you working internationally have these. Sorry, my phone was ringing. We have these holy policy numbers from policymakers around 2030, and I just want to say that it's not happening in a linear projection. We'll have industries looking at revising their equipment in 2026 or 2028 and making investment decisions for hydrogen or not. So there needs to be a perspective from the market, and Northage 2 tries to bring that perspective in the following months or year, and by looking at investment decisions over the course of this period. Next slide, please. Yeah, zoomed out on the Netherlands here. These orange lines are the extra pipelines needed for bringing a total hydrogen backbone. That this will cost €1 billion and a half. That may sound of a lot of money, and it is, but in terms of energy infrastructure, it's reasonable. So we already have lots of infrastructure in place. Between our ports, we're going to build an extra pipeline system. Then onwards to, let's say, the bigger city area of the Netherlands, so Amsterdam, Rotterdam port area. New pipelines need to come in place, and of course in the southern region, which is Camelot area, always south to the east, southeast. There's Camelot. They'll need lots of hydrogen also to abate and mitigate on CO2 pricing risk. So and you see the salt cavern symbol there up in the north. So everything is close by, which makes it easy to implement. And also at a very low cost. Next slide, please. I briefly touched upon this topic, but this is an overview of the stuff we already have in our region. So we see certain enablers of of our ecosystem that goes for NordH2 as well as the total investment plan. And there's typical things that make us unique. Or at least we tend to think so. So we have the strategic locations for electrolyzers. That's the port area. And again, we announced extra area last evening. Exciting times. We have the parallel gas infrastructure, like I just shown, scalable offshore wind. And then I said 4 to 6 gigawatt, but of course there's more. There's a possibility of more gigawatts further along the line in the future. The storage of salt caverns. That's pretty unique in this area to have everything combined, especially with the salt caverns. And we have the regional demand centers, and that's the industry already asking for hydrogen at a bigger scale. In other words, you have these launching customers to avoid having the problems of the, let's say, the chicken and egg discussion you see quite often in the hydrogen discussion. There's stuff that needs to happen in Europe, coming from the European Union and the national government in terms of regulation. That's something they're currently working at. And we have the National Hydrogen Program now running in the Netherlands, where we tend to speed up that process and make things possible. Next slide. Well, looking at the climate and energy transition targets, I'm sure you all understand that there's a sense of urgency, especially in this project, with the 100 people working on it from a variety of companies. So we need to realize these climate targets. If you look at the global targets, and I don't need to tell that we all agree to certain targets to bring down greenhouse gases by 2050. That translates in certain goals for Europe and then of course for the Netherlands. I think we're one of the front runners there. But yeah, we need to realize the 3 to 4 gigawatt electricity electrolyzer capacity by 2030 to make sure that we reach our goals as well. Germany is seeing the same. They have their national, just like France, by the way, they have their national hydrogen program announced. So if you take things into perspective, the Northern Netherlands alone is doing roughly the same as the target 5 gigawatt target from Germany. I see 5 minutes, so I'll speed up. Next slide, please. Yeah, we can skip this one, or let me say that we're looking at 400 kilotons of H2 production, but for those good at calculating, I'm sure you already noticed, and 600 kiloton of hydrogen over the course of the next phase between 2030 and 2030. And I believe this will be the 2030-2035 time frame, looking at speed of things currently. Next slide, please. So almost my last slide. This is an overview of our total project. And again, we're looking at building a larger scale wind farms. That's not something we're going to do alone. We need help from other players in the market, of course. But there's quite some experience in Eemshaven with larger wind farms. and bringing them online. All sorts of things need to happen. It's you need extra stones, you need extra cables, perhaps in the longer time, even pipelines, where part of the hydrogen production could be done on sea. That's not far-fetched. That's something we already think about. You need public, so the competent authorities, to work on corridors for cables and pipelines. And we always have the extra challenge of having to work with a nature conservation area, which is the Wadden Sea. But all the projects so far has been successful and within time. So we tend to do so the same with NordH2, of course. The port of Delfzijl is mentioned in this slide as well, and then further away the port of Hamburg. And we look up corporations there as well. Not a lot of people know that the gas Unie infrastructure actually runs all the way up to Berlin. So there's lots of infrastructure that could be used for delivering hydrogen in that same ecosystem as well, and bring in some flexibility and storage in the energy system. Next slide, please. Yeah, again, this is my last slide, and it's something we're very proud of. This is a recent announcement of Sky Energy. That's actually a Dutch-based company that used to trade in sustainable aviation fuels. Fuels were mentioned in the previous presentation by Francois. What I found interesting is that during this COVID-19 pandemic, there was lots of support, financial support from governments coming towards airliners. Those same governments ask for, so let's say, more strict sustainability schemes coming from the airliners as well. That happened in France, where they recently announced that internal flights are well, under certain conditions possible, but less than they were before. So the airliners see a let's say, also pushed by the European Union, by the way, regulation there. They see a reasoning behind stepping up their game around sustainable aviation fuels. So over the course of the next, let's say, the last 2 years, KLM together with HV Energy announced that they would take fuel from Sky Energy plant. Now Sky Energy is going to build this in our port, and one of the reasons why they're doing so is not just space. I mean, this is their plot, but they see that this is a typical region where more and more hydrogen projects will come online. So not trying to be advertising here, but I think this goes for all regions in Europe. There needs to be more factory plants like Sky Energy. People won't stop flying, but this gives a good perspective on let's say the chicken and egg discussion. You need certain things to happen. You need to build up demand. You need regions that have things in place to make it happen at a lower cost. I think this is a good example of a company that saw some perspective in the region around hydrogen. But again, that could be regions all over Europe where you try to bring things together. Thank you. I think I remained within my time, given time. So I want to thank the audience for listening, although I can't see you. Hope it was interesting, and I enjoyed giving the presentation quite much.
Thanks very much, Robert, for your presentation. And we have some interesting questions for you coming up, so just stay on the line. The next session, or rather the next speaker, is Martin Koopman from the Port of Rotterdam. It's really a great pleasure to welcome you, Martin. You have a great job title, Program Manager, Energy Transition. So looking forward to your thoughts.
Thanks, Ravi. Yeah, and yeah, nice to be here. As Robert said, I'm very unfortunate we can't see any of you, but I hope to get some interaction maybe afterwards. Yeah, I was asked kind of last minute to jump in and maybe tell a little bit about what we're doing at the Port of Rotterdam when it comes to hydrogen. And I think our story very much complements what Robert has just been saying. What drives us is actually a vision which we published about a year and a half ago, our white paper, which states that we actually anticipate the hydrogen demand to increase in the port area, and particularly in our hinterland area, to a whopping 20 million tons of hydrogen. And we've been working really hard in the last, few years to get all the infrastructure ready to be able to meet that demand. And by doing so, becoming maybe the hydrogen hub of Europe, where Groningen is the hydrogen valley, we would like to become the hydrogen port hub, and hence maybe on a world scale, we merge together into one. I've added one slide. I was hoping maybe that picture could be put on screen. Yes, thank you very much. This is the last picture of our flyer on hydrogen. You can find this on our website. And for me, the graph on the right really is a summary of the entire story. And yeah, if you reach out to me, I'm more than happy to give you a more detailed story version of it. But just the general story that we have is really portrayed in the graph on the right, where you see that we are currently, or 2020, last year, of course, already producing and consuming nearly 500,000 tons of hydrogen. It's mostly being used for hydrocracking at the refineries. And we are currently working really hard to develop a CO2 capture infrastructure together with GasUnie and EBN. And the aim is by 2025 to allow a number of industries to capture their CO2 and to be able to put it into a system that will store the CO2 in depleted gas fields offshore, so-called CCS. And the first 4 customers have already been announced, and they are Shell, Exxon, Air Products, and Air Liquide. And with them, with that project, we will be able to have the gray hydrogen production in our port transformed to so-called blue hydrogen, which is the so-called low carbon hydrogen. And that's what you see in the graph, that as the decade proceeds from 2020 to 2030, most of the gray hydrogen will be transformed to blue hydrogen. And we anticipate a new large-scale blue hydrogen plant called H-Vision to be added as well, which will see the total hydrogen production in the port increase. But also the demand at the same time, we are seeing a huge increase, maybe 2 to 3 times our current demand by the end of the decade. So we are anticipating 1.2 million tons of hydrogen, which is in the order of 120 gigawatts of renewable power if you would produce it locally. The big question is, how are we going to meet that demand? So as mentioned, we have blue hydrogen. We are also developing an electrolyzer park at the Maasvlakte, western end, so very similar to the North H2 project. We have an electrolyzer park with 4 plots that have already been claimed. Shell is the first hydrogen plant to be operational also by 2025, nearly 250 megawatts, and to be followed 2 years after by BP and 2 more customers after that. So as you see on the graph, in this decade, we're ready to start producing green hydrogen in the port and meeting some of the demand as well. And what you see in the graph, which is particularly interesting, is that inflection point in 2030. And this is where we anticipate the European regulations will be adjusted in such a way that the use of hydrogen will be really stimulated, and there will be a real takeoff of the hydrogen demand. And as some of the forecasts from the EU are showing 60 million tons of hydrogen consumption in Europe. And if you go into the details of it, the real shortage seems to be in 3 countries mainly, and they are the Netherlands, Germany, and Belgium. That's where the real short is. And clearly Rotterdam very well positioned to be a hub in the distribution network of hydrogen. So to continue back to the graph, we are also working or anticipating renewable power to come from offshore wind parks, which are being developed off the coast of Holland, North Holland, South Holland. However, the North Sea there is not as large as above Groningen. and hence we anticipate a limit of the amount of green power that we're going to have landing on shore and feeding into our electrolyzer parks. And hence our experts have anticipated a maximum local green hydrogen production of 2 million tons. So 20 gigawatts will produce 2 million tons of hydrogen. And clearly, if you look at the 2050 scenario, that is nowhere near what the demand is going to be. And due to political pressures, the blue hydrogen, the CCS scheme, is allowed to kick off as a transitional solution, but it's also been agreed in the political atmosphere that the blue hydrogen will be phased out by 2050. So in 2050, we're seeing a demand of 20 million tons. We see local green hydrogen production of 2 million tons, and hence a huge short. And this is where particularly my job was related to, is where we will clearly need to have hydrogen imported from other countries. And that could come by pipe, but we also believe that maritime hydrogen will be a key component of this new energy trade. And one of the reasons being that with a pipeline from a faraway country, you are always also reliant on whoever has their hand on the valve, if you know what I mean. And hence, waterborne energy transport has a larger security factor, and therefore we believe it will be a major part of the hydrogen supply to Northwest Europe. And clearly, we as the port are keen to receive these vessels. We're very realistic in anticipating a reduction in crude oil imports into our port. We are the largest energy port of Europe, and clearly, with that shift from fossil fuels to green fuels, we very much would like to become the green energy hub of Europe as well. And so, what we're doing now is we're preparing the port. We're working with our terminals, our existing tank terminals, but also dry bulk terminals and other terminals. And we're getting everybody into a mindset of thinking about the future, looking deep into the crystal ball. Plans are being made for partial conversions of existing terminals. And as such, we are anticipating that import of hydrogen to start already in 4 years from now, probably from the Middle East, green ammonia, because that's one of the key characteristics of hydrogen, is that it's not that easy to transport. It's probably going to be transported in different forms, either liquefied ammonia or dissolved in a so-called liquid organic hydrogen carrier. And we are ensuring that the port has all the facilities to receive the hydrogen, in whichever form it comes. Yeah, so with that, our anticipation is that we should be ready, probably already in 4 years from now, to receive the first imported hydrogen, as well as producing local green hydrogen and local blue hydrogen. And we'll be ready for this energy transition and see the new green energy flow through the port and onwards to the rest of Europe.
Thanks very much, Martin. Great presentation. I have a quick follow-up question for you, Martin. So I think a picture can say 1,000 words, and I like very much your diagram of the trade routes from the Middle East and so on. Do you think that these trade routes will also open up Rotterdam to become a hydrogen spot market hub, in addition to the industrial uses for the hydrogen that are obvious in places like Ismuiden and so on?
Well, yeah, it's a good question, Ravi. Clearly, we, as the Netherlands, actually, are already working on a potential hydrogen trading platform in the Netherlands. We're doing that together with GasUnie, Groningen Seaports, Amsterdam Seaports, and the Dutch government. Looking at developing a trading platform in the Netherlands to see that hydrogen will be traded in euros in the future, and clearly having the physical infrastructure and the physical flow of molecules in your facility, in your country, adds to the feasibility of that trading platform. We also need to be realistic that initially, probably the first contracts will be very much long-term contracts, a spot market. just like LNG, probably will take a few years for it to really take off. But we definitely hope and are keen and working hard to see that trading platform come to the Netherlands.
Thanks very much, Martin. Please, can we bring up the other speakers and we will carry on the panel discussion. Thanks. Francois, I have a question for you. So I think you spoke very well about what you think our sector should be doing, but actually, what is Geocell concretely doing as a company to prepare for the energy transition? What kind of liquids are you preparing to store right now?
That's a good question, and thank you for that. So usually Geocell stores basically crude oil and diesel and gasoline. Obviously, biofuels are high on the list to accommodate in our salt caverns, but we are also seriously considering storing H2 in our caverns, and also seriously considering developing some renewable hydrogen facility. We are not as advanced as the North H2 project, but basically we believe that for something like Geocell, there is clearly it's a good model. This integrated model is clearly a good model for us, and it's very inspiring for us, as a matter of fact. Thank you, Robert, because what you're doing is really what we think should be done in the southeast of France too. And Geocell, we believe, could be part of this story. Very easily, with all your graph, to understand where Geocell could be, storing hydrogen, transporting hydrogen with pipelines and things like that.
Thanks, Francois. Interesting that you are on the call, because Robert referenced very heavily in his presentation the role of underground storage in hydrogen infrastructure. A question to you, Robert. Why underground storage and not above ground storage? And also, without wishing to be too provocative, how come there are no storage companies directly involved in your consortium?
Oh, there very well might be. It's a matter of what you have in your region. It makes sense for us, of course, that the essence you have, that you use them. And we already have the salt caverns, especially since gasoline is actually one of the stakeholders there. It makes total sense, of course, to make use of that. I do believe that, especially in Eemshaven and Delfzijl, a support area, we'll see other storage facilities as well, because you basically need them. You need them for in terms of security of supply. You need them close to the factories. They need some flexibility in the system anyway. So yeah, I see a great opportunity to for other players to bring in hydrogen storage. And let's not forget that we already have a company called Vopak in the port area. Not saying that they're going to do hydrogen storage in Eemshaven, but broadly they're looking at opportunities as such. So yeah, I do see things moving in that direction. And again, I think we need that. If you look at the complete value chain, you need that separate storage unit as well.
Right. Martin, would you like to comment on the role of above ground storage or underground storage in the plans for the Port of Rotterdam?
Yeah, well, I think clearly Groningen or northern Netherlands is blessed with salt layers that allow for the production of these salt caverns that have been used for natural gas and are going to be used for hydrogen. And I think we in Rotterdam further south don't have these geographical advantages, but we're very lucky that we can very easily connect to the GasUnie national grid. Robert showed a really nice picture of the ring network that we have in the Netherlands, and GasUnie is working to transform one of the 4 pipes into a hydrogen pipe. And so, yeah, we'll be directly connected to those underground caverns, and I think that's going to be a key component of efficient transport. So it's really, really important that we connect. Like I said, Groningen and Rotterdam really aren't that far apart. In other countries, you'd probably consider it one city, and I think maybe we should as well. So we're all one, and it's a great blessing that we have that in the Netherlands.
Good flexibility. I have a question from Irene Bonetti. Irene is actually a board member of FETSA, but she's also the terminal manager at Kamenyani Terminals. And her question is, I would like to know if in the Netherlands you have any problems with the hydrogen danger perception from ordinary people. Francois referenced some of the handling difficulties and safety difficulties of hydrogen. So how do you cope with public opinion? Let's start with you, Martin.
Yeah, it's a good point. We tend to spend a lot of time on stakeholder management. To date, we have not really picked up any deep concerns. I think most of the general public and surrounding us are extremely happy that we're working so positively on the energy transition, and we're working on new fuels. But I'm certain that when these projects come closer to FID and the EIAs go out, that you'll see a lot of concerns raised, and we have a whole team to address those issues. Clearly, it's not new for us. We have a lot of exciting products in the Port of Rotterdam. Just to name LNG for one, and we went through the whole transition with LNG, which also had its safety concerns. And yeah, I think we're going to tackle this one as well.
Francois, I have a question for you. You mentioned in your presentation that tank storage infrastructure is perfectly adapted to mobility, but we hear more and more about vehicle sharing, people taking bikes, even at EU level in the European Commission Smart Mobility Plan, it wants to promote pedestrians and walking. So if we see demand for traditional fuels reducing, how is our infrastructure going to cope?
Yeah, that's a good question. And clearly, things are moving and new forms of mobility are appearing. But if you consider that, the major changes are basically inner cities. You have new electric vehicles, new electric bikes, new electric whatever you want, new electric skateboards and things like that. But if you look on the long distance and heavy payload transportation, well, it continues to be very traditional, and I believe it will continue to be very traditional. So it's clearly probably some of the infrastructures that are too close to the cities will have to change, will have to have a new use. But for other type of infrastructure, I really believe that they will see their usage, their value, their industrial value increase, as a matter of fact, because you will still need, and clearly the North H2 project or the Rotterdam project are very clear, they all rely on an existing infrastructure to foster this infrastructure towards this new this new energy use. So basically, the fact that you start to share your car, well, as a citizen, I consider it's a very good thing. And what does that mean? That means that instead of producing cars that will only last 5 to 10 years, and after you have to throw them away, you will have cars that will be much more durable, much more sustainable, which means bigger cars, which means at the end of the day, the need for energy for these cars, the need for an infrastructure around these cars will still exist and will still be there. So for me, it's really an opportunity. And it doesn't mean that things won't change. Things will change, but it's like the tide. We can surf the tide, and that's my proposal. And that's what Robert and Martin are doing, as a matter of fact. Very inspiring.
I think it helps that that you see certain figures from the public domain starting to drive hydrogen cars, for instance. I have to be honest, I drive an electric car, but the fact is that especially in the Groningen region, the public authorities choose to come with a tender for a hydrogen train. I had the pleasure of meeting with the mayor of the city of Groningen last Monday, and he announced that he's now using a hydrogen lease car for his personal transportation. So, and all these little things matter, but I agree totally with Francois. Lots of cities will implement stricter rules. There will be a mixture of electricity-based, smaller trucks perhaps, and but bigger transportation will be based on cleaner fuels and I believe hydrogen. We actually have one of those hydrogen truck producers here in the region, which is called Hyzen, together with Oldhausen. I think they're going to be quite successful. We've noticed in our port that more and more truck transportation companies will order hydrogen trucks. So that's, like Francois said before, that's happening. That's not let's say the near future. It's already happening.
Robert, your presentation focused quite a lot on existing gas grid infrastructure, and we have a question from Patrice Bress from M4X. Are you counting on natural gas pipes being converted instantly into hydrogen service, or do you plan to have hydrogen progressively injected into natural gas pipes?
It's actually a bit different. There's the current backbone system in the Netherlands is actually a two-way street where you have two types of quality gases being brought into. So, and the fact is that we want to stop the Groningen production. Let's say the quality of gas tends to change a bit, which is why we're pumping in a different quality of gas and nitrogen in it. But the fact is that there's a double layer system. So a part of that will still be used by gas, and we believe gas will be used over the course of the next decades, and not just for the heating of homes, but also smaller factories and so on. So, but of course, we tend to move towards a fossil-free economy. So it's good that you have the double layer system where you can bring in hydrogen at a certain volume, but it needs to happen in clusters. So the fact that Rotterdam is building a cluster which will be connected to that same backbone system, we're doing so, but you need to have demand close by, and I believe Rotterdam is looking at the same value chain there. So again, you need to work from clusters, and then you step towards this bigger system, and then of course Northwestern Europe. That's the ambition.
Martin, I knew that you would get a reaction when you started talking about ammonia. So there's a question here from Yves Kernan, Operations and SHE Manager. And his question is that green ammonia will cost about 3 times as much as conventional ammonia. Do you expect the Middle East to switch completely to green ammonia production? And will you invest in green ammonia storage in Rotterdam?
To unmute myself. So there's a number of questions in there. And actually from the SHE manager, I was expecting a question on the danger and toxicity of ammonia, but I'll leave that one. There's a number of questions in that. First of all, he is anticipating green ammonia to be 3 times what gray ammonia is. Our information is showing a different factor of 1.5. And recently we are hearing certain companies that are saying that they are looking at only a premium of 20 to 30% over gray ammonia. Ammonia price fluctuates, so there's a lot of variables in that factor. So, but there will be a premium. That's a fact. And so the question is, will there be customers willing to pay the premium for the fact that the product is green? Now, ammonia can be used in a number of ways. The largest use of ammonia is of course for fertilizer, and fertilizer is an industry that's looking for rock bottom prices, and they're probably going to be the last one to convert to green ammonia. There are, however, also uses for ammonia in the chemical industry, and some of those special chemical industry companies are already indicating they're willing to pay the premium, and they can get their customers to actually pay the premium to them. So there is a business case for that. But then I think the most important use of green ammonia, at least in the short run this decade, and we've Robert mentioned a project in Saudi Arabia, which are currently claiming to have the cheapest green ammonia in the world. They're going to bring the ammonia to Europe. Rotterdam may be their landing port. And the idea, of course, is to crack the ammonia back to hydrogen and to actually sell the hydrogen, the green hydrogen, again with a premium on the market. There, of course, you have the same question. Are there customers willing to pay the premium for the green hydrogen? The green hydrogen will be 3, 4, 5 times as high as gray hydrogen, but there is a belief that there are a number of sectors that are willing to pay for it. Maybe a last part of the question was whether the Middle East will convert to green ammonia. The interesting thing there, again, is that Saudi Arabia is already exporting blue ammonia and will be exporting green ammonia in the near future. But they're more into the export and not so much into the use, because they're finding that the customers that are willing to pay the premium are actually not in the Middle East so much, but in the other markets in North Asia or in Europe. And so there needs to be a new incentive system in the Middle East to get the Middle Easterners also to adopt to these green products, whether it's green ammonia, green hydrogen, or green methanol. And of course, we're trying to solve a global problem, not a local problem. So I think that's also something, that's still one of the problems out there. Let's all shift to this new energy form. Otherwise, it doesn't make any sense.
Nice remarks. We have time for 1 or 2 more questions. So Francois, let me bring you back into the discussion. We had a question at the very beginning of your presentation from Italo Brachieri from Star Logistics. And he says, an important increase in the use of electric batteries is expected. Which are the liquid products for the transition to electricity for which storage needs are expected in the near future? And maybe I can add on to that. Do you think that tank storage companies can somehow play a role when it comes to using tanks as batteries?
That's a tough question. First of all, electricity is not an easy product to store, as you know, and batteries are quite expensive. Let's just look at something. Some people receive huge amount of money from huge public support to design battery storages. So I don't see why our tank storage facilities could not accommodate some batteries themselves to be part of this project. And I think that public support should also go to our tank storage industry to see and to basically give an advantage to our industry in this kind of electricity storage. As a matter of fact, Mrs. van der Leyen, as she said, she's perfectly conscious that she has to transform and to create new jobs for people working in the oil and gas industry. That's a good way to support our industry, to give us an advantage in any kind of electricity storage, first of all. Secondly, there exists some research about batteries that are using redox technologies that use basically liquids, and these liquids can be used in tanks or in caverns to design huge batteries. As a matter of fact, it can work. It is still quite frontier. It is still quite a frontier research, but by 2040, by 2050, it's also an existing possibility. So we should consider that. Thirdly, like Martin said, green ammonia is a way. Green ammonia and other fluids are a way to transport hydrogen, and then you can, instead of transporting hydrogen in its gas form, you can add hydrogen to other molecules to transport liquids like green ammonia or like other kind of liquids, and then crack this hydrogen very close to the distribution center. And that's where, again, we can play a role, our infrastructures can play a role to incorporate this hydrogen into the molecules and to crack them close to the end user. So there are many possibilities. It's an open world.
Thanks, Francois. We are starting to run out of time a little bit, so maybe I can ask each of you in turn if you have any final remarks. So maybe we can start with you, Martin, from the Port of Rotterdam.
Yeah, final remarks. The world is changing, and I think everybody in the world seems to be getting the right mindset and making the plans. We also, however, need to be realistic. At the moment, green hydrogen is not affordable, and hence we still have a lot of work to do to get it done. But I think the momentum is there, and if we keep going in this way, then we're going to see a fantastic transition to a new fuel.
Robert, the floor is yours.
I was going to say nothing to add there, except for perhaps kickstarting the hydrogen economy together. And we need every expertise along that value chain. And I think lots of the people in the audience come into play in that story.
Francois, you have the last word. And also, just so you know, 95% of participants support your idea of a roadmap.
That's great. Basically, I completely agree with what Martin and Robert said, and I think we all have to work. It's a problem of network infrastructure, and I think really the North H2 project or the Rotterdam project are clearly inspiring one. We are far from an economically affordable green hydrogen, but the only way to reach that is clearly to have a network attitude and to drive and to write a roadmap with European authorities.
Thanks very much, all of you, for your great preparation and your insights. And we'll send you a little present to remind you of the first FETSA virtual conference. Right now, let me pass the floor to Ulfert Cornelius, the FETSA president, who can give some concluding remarks on the proceedings. Ulfert, we cannot hear you because you are muted.
Oh, sorry for that. Ravi, thanks a lot. Well, thanks also for the presentations to the speakers, not only today, but also on Monday. It's our first virtual conference as FETSA. I enjoyed it a lot. I'm also inspired by it. I think it was a great opportunity to have you all together, also to network a bit. We've heard on the first day from the regulators, today from our sector. Key message from me is what I've taken is we are not anymore in the preparation stage, but we are already on the way forward to commercialize and develop a more climate neutral liquids. Also, these products need to be stored. They need to be imported, exported. Energy security will play a major role in this. Supply and demand needs to be balanced. And storage will be an essential, critical part of a smooth logistics chain for these emerging products. And I'm absolutely convinced that our industry will be an important factor on this. Both governments and the private sector are making investments in terms of time, but of course also in resources to set up this new logistic change. We've heard, especially on Monday, about the milestones 2030 and 2050 for emission reductions to achieve the climate neutrality goals. As we are getting closer to these deadlines, the pressure to adopt to these new technologies will increase. And we are part of this story. This conference is also seen from my side as a way to prepare for it. Reason why we meet is to take stock of the progress, to share ideas, to be inspired, as I mentioned before, and I've been inspired by the presentations today, but also Monday, and also share, exchange on the actions being taken already. I hope you all go home. Probably most of you will stay home with some new good ideas. After, in a few minutes, we have also the chance for some networking time. You can visit the expo, contact each other to chat, and please take the chance to go for the randomized chat roulette. But before we go to the networking, I would say thank you to several people. First of all, of course, to the speakers. Great presentations we had, interesting panel discussions we just had. Of course, I want to thank all of you for attending this meeting. Getting 160 people together on this topic is, from my point of view, a great achievement. I would like to thank all for Tank Storage Magazine, our media partner, and our supplier partners for supporting us in this event. I will also thank Charlene and Hannah for their excellent logistic support to have this conference here, this virtual conference. Without their support, this would never ever have worked. Of course, I would also like to thank Ravi for the great work he has done to prepare for this conference, and also the secretary from the national associations who supported Ravi in it. So for now, yeah, everybody please stay connected. We will open the exhibition and the networking function to meet and discuss together. Hope to see you physically soon. Enjoy the rest of the day. Thanks a lot, and of course, stay healthy.